starting.
This meeting is being recorded.
That's great. I didn't realize there was how many schools they have down there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's his dream. He wants to go to DC because he wants to be an attorney. So
oh wow.
Howard has they have a great football program and they have a really good law program.
Yeah.
So hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our third Lunch and Learn series with Virginia Spell. And today's focus is to explore power structures. We're really lucky, Virginia, as you know, Virginia is a board member and has been for some years at Continuum. She's also plays a leadership role at the Urban League. I don't know are you still the interim CEO, Virginia, or do you have
until the end of the week?
Oh, okay. And she's a VP of programs. And she has a very broad and deep experience leading sessions around race and equity and race relations. So we're very fortunate to have Virginia. And from this point on, this is Virginia's show. So Virginia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And thank you all for joining again. I think these conversations are definitely important, especially within the organization culture, to ensure that the culture of the organization reflects who you all are as individuals. So we've had an opportunity over the past two series to talk about race, to talk about allyship, to talk about the partnership in really undoing racism and how each of us plays a significant role in making sure that within continuum of care, the structure of undoing racism is a priority for leadership as well as, frontline staff, front-facing staff. Today, we're going to talk about exploring the power structure, because you can't really talk about reducing racism within an organization or within a culture, within a group, unless you talk about the power dynamic that is very prevalent in racism. So when we think about power is probably the greatest enabler of racism. You can't talk about racism without talking about power. The fact is that power lies in the center of all of our relationships. So when we think about the work that we do to change people's lives and tackle injustice and racism, we've got to talk about the power structure as an equation, as part of the equation. I was sharing with Deborah before we joined the call that last week I was at my Urban League convention. We were in DC, and I heard something that kind of resonated with me, and it really stuck with me. And it was a session that I was at that talked about the employer-employee power shift. And it talked about removing racism, because it is not just detrimental to the health of an organization, but to the relationships, that the bonds and the relationships within an organization. And one of the speakers used the term a culture of belonging and not just being included. And that really stuck with me, because when you think about power, employees and employers need to ensure that within the culture of an organization, that people don't feel like they're just being included for the sake of it. They want to be included, or they want to have a sense of belonging within an organization. So when you think about the ability to belong, you have to think about institutional power, the ability or official authority within an organization to really decide what's best for others. That's what institutional power is. It is the CEO making the final decision as to what is best for the organization. So with that also comes the ability to determine who has access and who has resources. Who is the person who gets to sit at the table, or who is the person that the power within the organization is investing their time and their talent in. So when you think about prejudice and institutional power, you know that the systems that discriminate against groups are usually held within that institutional power. So the systems that enable one group to be dominant over another group also has the ability to limit their rights, their freedom, access to essential resources, education, employment, housing. All of those things fall within the structure of institutional power. So when you look at the dynamics within Continuum, you want the institutional power within the organization to work on behalf of everybody within the organization. So with that comes the understanding of how privilege works. So I want to talk a little bit about privilege, because oftentimes when we think of privilege, it's the people who have the privilege that don't realize they have the privilege or don't acknowledge that they have the privilege. And those are the folks that are able to limit the power within the organization. So privilege, you know, what is privilege? So who has privilege? Usually it is white, male, heterosexuals, able-bodied. When you think of all the, I'm sorry, guys. When you think of privilege, people who have privilege are usually invisible to it, aren't they? They are the people that dominate others often and not realize the privilege that they have is usually unearned, right? It is granted to them by right of who they are. Okay, if I'm not answering my phone, there's a reason. So those who have privilege, which we can identify as those that I mentioned before: white, heterosexual, able, all of the isms that we want to avoid. They are often the ones who are also oppressors or disenfranchised groups, right? They are the ones often who are making decisions for people based on what they think is best. So how do you undo that when you think about racism? As an allied or as a person who is the target of the oppressed, how do you ensure that the privilege or the person who has the ability to oppress, how do you remove that from your organization? How do you address it within an organization? Right? First thing you have to do is you have to identify it. You have to name it. You have to call it. You have to acknowledge it, right? You can't remove something that you don't acknowledge or accept as being a reality. It is a reality that there are those who have privilege and there are those who oppress. I mean, I think about in nonprofit work, we think about how funders fund our programs, right? It is those in power who are holding tight control and have the capacity or the ability to make decisions for others. So whether you are in leadership or you are someone who is reports to leadership, it is acknowledging what role we as individuals play in the power structure. When we think of funders who are setting the determinants as to what a community needs, as opposed to the community deciding what they need and request that they be funded, right? It is those in power who are determining what they think is best based on their privilege, right? Based on how they think money should be allocated, on how they think a problem should be solved, on how they think we should operate in our circles, within our circles. So we want to have conversations within our organization to ensure that our privilege, that we are leaving it at the door when we're in communities of color, right? So we're coming to the table with a clean slate saying, you know, this is what we think we need as an individual to be successful, to succeed. So that means we have to have those conversations with leadership, right? We have to be able to have an open door within our organization to say, you know, the decisions that you are making may not always be best for the people that we serve. We have to have those kind of uncomfortable conversations with leadership. How do we do that though? How do we do that? How do we create those opportunities within our organization to have those conversations with the leadership within our organization to make sure that we're all on the same page as to not just what is best for the clients we serve, what's best for the morale of the company, what's best for the future direction maybe of a program or the way we deliver our service, right? It's by making sure that we have that commitment to dialogue by leadership. It's making sure that those who are in positions of power understand and accept the fact that the tide doesn't always shift for those who, you know, work on the front lines, you know, making sure that people are paid for their time and their talent, and that people are compensated fairly and equitably, right? By making sure that that we lead by example. We have I have a saying within our organization: I don't ask my staff to do anything that I'm not willing to do. If it means that, well, this is not a good example because I don't want to do this, but if the toilet stopped up, you know, is the expectation that the lowest person on the totem pole is the person responsible for unplugging the toilet? Or is Patty going to get the plunger, right? That's the kind of organization or the type of structure within an organization that ensures equity and ensures fairness, right? It is by us as leaders saying, we don't ask anybody to do something that we're not willing to do. And that there's no job within an organization that we are too good for, right? And for those who report up, it's saying, you know, this is the direction you may think that the organization should go, but this is my recommendation that, you know, based on my experience on the front line, this is what I'm seeing. And being able to say that to Gretchen or to Dave or to Patty or, you know, whomever is in leadership, is by saying them, this is a suggestion I have that will benefit the organization. But you have to have a safe culture to be able to do that, right? You've got to feel like when you say that to leadership, that they are listening and they are willing to accept that they may not know everything, right? It's Gretchen saying, my door's open and I welcome suggestions. Is that I'm asking my team, how do they think this works? Or how does this feel? Or does this seem right? It's being willing to be humble as a leader, but it's also those who you are leading feeling like you are willing as a leader to embrace other opinions. We all come, to our work experience with our own lived experience, right? It's not just what we learned in school, it's also what we experience in life. And the one thing that people of color bring to an organization is a unique perspective about what it feels like to be Black, right? What it feels like to live in a racist environment where institutional racism, power, and privilege have dominated most of our experience, right? I shared my experience on the train. What does that feel like, getting on a train, being a person of color, and knowing that you could be racially profiled, you could be, at this time in our country, you could literally be putting your life on the line, right? By going into a grocery store, right? By going into a church, by being at an event, right? Because of the color of your skin. So within the institutional power structure of this organization, it has to be a safe place for people to share their lived experience. It has to be a safe place where you could talk about race and you can express how you feel, how it feels to be a person of color in a country where historically we've been marginalized, right? We've been, disenfranchised. We've been, our rights as a human being have been attacked. Civil rights in our country is under attack. So within an organization, it's important that leadership have the capacity to exercise control over our safety, as well as our ability to prosper, to learn, to grow within an organization. You can't have an organization that, one of the statistics I heard over the week that since our last convention, the number of Black and brown CEOs in corporate America increased by 3. Not 300, not 3,000, by 3. People of color represent less than 1% of leaders in corporate America. So what does that say to everybody else who's climbing the corporate ladder? What that says is that there is no place in this structure for me. So how do we as leaders groom, prepare, promote people of color within our organizational structure? So there's 2 ways. As the leader, it means that you've got to be invested in your people. It means that you've got to be invested in ensuring that there is a pipeline for leadership opportunities for people of color, right? For women, and for people of color, and for people who are I lost my thought just that quick, brain fog. The other thing is that people within your organization, you need to mentor them, right? You need to mentor so that you are ensuring that Continuum always has a pipeline of qualified individuals. It doesn't mean that you're going to pick somebody who you've taken a liking to, and you're going to put them under your wing. They still need to be qualified, but they need to see that you are invested in ensuring that they have an opportunity within the organization to grow. So for those who want to grow, what does that mean for you? That means that you have to articulate that to leadership, that I see my future here at Continuum, and I need you to tell me what steps I need to take to ensure that I will continue to be elevated and grow within this organization. And I need you to tell me who might be a good mentor for me, or I want you to mentor me. We need to be really clear about where we align allyship as well as mentorship, right? We've got to mentor people of color. We've got to be allies to people of color if we want to see our organization continue to be racially diverse and equitable for all. So that means both sides have a role. So staff, you need to figure out, where I want to be within this organization. If I want to see myself one day as the CEO at Continuum, that means I have to align my education, my mentorship, my relationships within the organization to put me on that path. But that also means that whoever is supervising you, they have to invest in that. They have to see your vision, and they have to not be threatened by it. It is not, oftentimes what leaders do is that they become fearful that that person is looking to take their job, right? So because I don't want to lose my opportunity, I'm not going to take anybody else under my wing and let them grow. And that is not being a good leader. That's not being a good leader. The best leaders are the ones who are happy to step aside when the people that they have mentored have exceeded them or grown, matured, grown within the organization to a point where they would be the next great leader. That's a good leader, that you're not afraid of somebody taking your spot or taking your shine or taking anything from you. That's the best leader. The best leader is the person who wraps their arms around you and says, we're on this journey together because we're all doing good work, right? This is all of the work that we do, no matter what role you play at Continuum, everybody's role is essential, right? But when you see that aspiring employee who is really on the right path to leadership, we should be promoting them. We should be, and not just promoting them as it relates to leadership, promoting them up a rank, but we should be saying, Patty, we need to watch out for this person here. She's going places, he's going places. There's a great opportunity within this organization for them to be a leader within this organization. When I say promote, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. When you are wrapping your arms around somebody who's really doing good work, and you're saying, you know what can I do to help elevate this person to the next level? The best organizations have employees that grow from within. But when you've got turnover, when you, as a leader, when you've got a lot of turnover under you, you got to look at what type of leader you are. Because people who lead well, their team, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave. They never want to leave their position. They just want to keep growing because the experience and the culture within that organization is like their air. They breathe for that. right? So if you're stuck in your role and you don't feel like your supervisor, your manager is invested in you, you have to figure out, is it one, do they feel threatened by what I bring to the table? Are they not interested in promoting from within? Or do they not just, they don't believe you could do the job, right? And we want to change that dynamic. I said, and it might have been in the last board meeting we had, I think I asked Patty, we were talking about leadership, and I asked, what is the process for developing leaders from your current staff? And I think that's important. Bless you, Gretchen. It's important for leaders at that senior level to look at that. It's important for your senior leadership to constantly be assessing the talent from within and figuring out what can we do to further their career path, to enhance their opportunity to be future leaders within this organization. Gretchen's not going to be here forever. Dave's not going to be here forever. John's not going to be here forever. Patty's not going to be here forever, right? Dee's not going to be here forever. So who's next in line? Who's next in line within this organization to be the future John, Gretchen, Dee, Patty? Who's next? Are you as employees seeking out those opportunities within the power structure of this organization? Or are you thinking, I'm 5 years here and then I'm going someplace else? That's a model that the current generation leans toward more. Older folks like me, we find some place we like and we stay there forever. But we do that because the opportunity of growth was given to us. Somebody took us by our hand and said, I see you, and I think you would be great in this role. These are the things that we're going to work on. When I came to the Urban League, my background is in housing. I was a housing counselor. I ran the housing division. I've had every role within this organization, some of which I didn't want, but every role within this organization because I had people that were invested in my growth, invested in making sure every opportunity within the power structure of my organization was afforded to me. And that meant leadership development. That meant, enhancing my skill set. That meant, taking on assignments and projects that maybe I was, maybe not quite sure I was qualified for or was not quite ready for, but given those opportunities to try something new. So what does Continuum need to do to make that opportunity available? What do we need to do to ask for those opportunities within management to make sure they understand that our goal is not to just be here 5 years and leave, but our goal is to make a career out of Continuum. Our goal is to climb that leadership ladder and be a leader within this organization. So whether the power within an organization is hidden or indirect, sometimes that power is called agenda setting power, right? So we all want to have that agenda setting power. We want to have the opportunity to decide and influence decisions within the organization. We don't just want to be the hidden power, right? The hidden power that we have that's not tapped by leadership, right? We don't want to have the hidden talent that's not tapped by leadership. There is a great comment in the chat. Create a leadership program for mentoring the future of Continuum. I freaking love it. I love it because the only people who can really change the power structure from privilege to a shared power is the employees. It's creating that culture of belonging and not just being here. And you do that by setting up a structure within the organization that benefits everybody and affords everybody the opportunity of growth. You're not going to all be able to make the decisions. The final decision has to be with the CEO because she's accountable. She's accountable to the funders. She's accountable to the board. She's accountable to the state. But when decisions are made within an organization, the best leaders seek guidance and information from the team that they build, right? So whether it's a team under Dee, whether it's a team under David, whether it's a team under Gretchen or John, it is that nucleus, that team that is going to help change the culture of the organization to be a culture of belonging. And I think having a mentorship program, having a leadership program within your organization to cultivate the next great leaders for this organization, that's critical. That's critical. And you all should want to be a part of that and not just be a participant, but be a leader within that structure. Make sure that the suggestions for the organization are making their way up the chain. They're making their way all the way up to the CEO's desk, right? And that those that you report to, the direct reports, are that you have that dialogue and you have that open communication and you talk about issues that are of concern to you, but also that you talk about opportunities for the organization to address any issues within the organization. I mean, we started on this journey really talking about race, and it's still about race, but it's also about the power dynamics that often hold people of color back from addressing issues that are of concern to them, right? If you don't feel comfortable saying to your leadership that something that they said was, could be perceived as racist, or that it made you uncomfortable, if you don't have that culture within your organization to do that, then you're definitely not going to have the culture within your organization to support your growth, your personal growth. And you're not going to want to stay. If you feel like you're working for an organization that has racial undertones to it, you're not going to be invested in staying here long, right? You're going to be looking for the next organization. And somebody on, I believe our last call even said that they were at an organization that there were some racial undertones there, and the first opportunity they left, right? And that's what happened. That's when you have a power dynamic within an organization that talks the talk about being an anti-racist organization, but they're not walking the walk. And that's not the culture that we want here at Continuum. We want for leadership to not just talk the talk, but to also back it up with the actions. And that means cultivating and developing a team that addresses racial issues, that promotes leadership from within, and that is equitable and safe for everybody who's here. Does that make sense? So these sessions are always supposed to be a safe space, right? It's always supposed to be an opportunity for us to discuss or digest or explore what an anti-racist organization looks like, right? And I'm really interested in what some of you think will enhance or improve Continuum's ability to continue to address racial issues.
Me too. I would really love to hear from people.
So privilege within an organization, it often operates in personal, interpersonal, cultural, institutional layers, right? Privilege and power are also dominant in people who lead, right? In order for you all to grow into an anti-racist organization, the concepts of privilege and power, you have to be acknowledged that they're real, right? That they're real, they're alive in any institution, right? Even within this one. There are, Patty is afforded things that many of you are not afforded just because she's a white woman. It's a fact. If Patty doesn't accept that, her privilege and her power also comes from her being a white woman, then she will always be ineffective at addressing racism within our organization. So Patty's had to accept that. She knows that just because of the color of her skin, she has been afforded avenues in ways that many of you will not be able to navigate as smoothly through. So how do you change that? You change it by having open dialogue and calling it what it is, right? Patty's a white woman, right? Deborah's a white woman. There are places that they can go and things that they can do, which what a Black woman won't be able to as easily, right? Gretchen's experience and Dee's experience, lived experience, are going to be different just because of the color of their skin. But the only way you can get to an anti-racist organization is by calling it that and acknowledging it that and saying, how do we as an organization navigate around it then, right? Because anybody who walks in the door that Dee is going to interview for a position, she's going to afford them the exact same opportunity just because she knows what it's like to be a woman of color and not have those same opportunities. The same can be said for roles in leadership, right?
Virginia?
Dave,
Oh, I'm sorry. Pramada has her
go
hand
ahead.
raised. I just wanted you to know that Pramada has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Famada.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
wanted to kind of respond to your question. So one thing I find to be a little bit successful, at least at 70%, 80% rate in the work of equity, is kind of having like a charter, asking like staff, what is it that they need in order for them to feel, whether it's feel safe, feel like they're contributing in the work of whether it's equity or just the voice being heard. And not just using that charter as like something that you file away, but you make that part of your, like the policies of the company, which means that you bring that out quarterly and ask staff, feedback on how they feel, if the charter is actually working for them, if they feel heard, if they feel they can go to the supervisors and have like a really candid conversation regarding whether it's race or how they feel on site is, I think that kind of hold every single person accountable in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Ada, is that like program by program? Is that the policies and procedures that we just addressed by the Racial Justice Task Force meeting, that we tried to put that kind of language into that would assure that people understood that this was an environment of anti-racism and equality? Is that the same thing, or is it something different?
So this one is mainly the staff being like the voice. So those words, for instance, using, I don't know if you guys use Jamboards before. So Jamboard is Google Jamboard. So it's basically an interactive platform where maybe like on a meeting like this, what is one word that you will use to describe your feelings at Continuum? Maybe for someone will say curiosity. They want to be curious. They want to be, they want to feel safe. Whatever word, those words that they choose, you use those words to form part of your charter. And as that charter, now, if I say I want to be curious, for instance, and now I talk to my supervisor about something and my supervisor thinks that, oh, you can ask that question. My curiosity has been shut down. So now that's a conversation we need to have. Like, okay, we asked for this. Inclusivity. If someone say I want it to be an inclusive environment and they start to bring out those conversations and the supervisor is not open to that or try to use that as a punitive to the staff, now that's a conversation. Okay, we're not really using our charter. So using the charter is like, it can be done in smaller teams, so that's a big way for programs to have lower turnover, because the manager is also held accountable to the charter, not just the staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I love the idea. The one thing that I want you all to think about, something that I always tell groups, is you don't need another piece of paper that makes a statement. It's not about what's written. It's about where people go and how people feel. So where do you go? Who do you talk to if they're if you experience some form of racism? How is that handled, and where do you go? Who hears you, right? If you feel like your direct supervisor is not investing in you, or your supervisor is not, you don't feel like you're getting the proper training, or where do you go? What's the culture of the organization that makes it safe for you to have these conversations?
Yeah, and how do we accomplish this, because we are so large now and we are so spread out? Is it more people participating in the Racial Justice Task Force meeting, which is where we are forming policies and activities? What is it?
So
How do
I would
that?
say if people are not signing up and joining on to the Racial Justice Task Force, it's because they don't believe in it. It's because it has not been demonstrated to them that it is going to make a difference in how they show up for work, right? It's not gonna, it's one thing to address something that happens in the country. We were all impacted by the death of George Floyd, right? A lot of programs, conversations, focus groups, we did all of that. But when the temperature goes down and we're not having an incident of racial injustice in our country, how do we internally fix issues within our organization? And I would submit to you that if you don't have every single Black person, Black and brown person, abled person, if you don't have everybody signing up for your task force, there's usually a reason. So I would say, my opinion would be, circle back and let's figure out what works for everybody. How many people on this call are on the committee?
Not too many.
So I would ask then, why isn't everybody else?
I think that if I may share from a program end, I do think that it can be very difficult in the programs when you have your residents around, much more difficult than I think anyone administratively ever can imagine. You know, when you're sitting in an office and there's constantly somebody knocking on the door, or there is somebody who needs something, it can be really difficult for people in the programs, which generally our direct care staff are in the programs. And so I'm wondering if maybe there was a way to administratively support the programs a little differently around the time of the Racial Justice Task Force, to see if we can't encourage more of the people at the program level to join versus more of the administrative side or the management side. I mean, I'd love them to also, but to kind of get that representation from the direct care employees.
So that is a perfect example, Gretchen, of a power structure that is working against your goal.
Right.
So that is a time when you go back to the management or the frontline staff, and you say collectively, how are we going to make this work for us?
Yeah.
Because that's a management decision, place and time. But if it doesn't work with the people you're trying to capture, that's a perfect example of how the structure, the power structure, made a decision that impacts all of the employees, but on a lower level, nobody was included to determine how that's going to work. right? So I think the work is so important. More hands need to be on it to make sure that it stays relevant, that it's not just something that we say we do until the next George Floyd happens, or, we want it to be our work all the time. So what's a better time? What's a better day? What's a better, time for this work to convene? Because the hard work of putting it together, that piece was done, right? The hard work of putting it together, but to get the voices at the table so that it means something, means that power structure has to shift. And maybe, I think leadership needs to play a role, needs to be there to ensure that structure, the commitment to structure is there, but it should be led by the people that work for the organization. It should be the voices of those who are directly impacted by structural systemic racism. Their voices should be the most prominent ones that we're hearing, right? So I love that you highlighted that, Gretchen, because that is thinking about how we as an organization can do it differently or do it better. So the racial justice group should be direct care employees. They're the ones with on the front lines and have a more focused lens.
That is true, I agree. However, when the memo went out, it went out to all the management team to ask, to share that with your team. Some may have, some may have not. However, speaking from just my experience and sharing it with my team and saying, listen, this is what's going on, sending out a reminder to say, hey, would you like to be a part of it? So at first, initially with the first session, some of the team was reluctant. I got on, I said, I'm interested. Here's some of the things that they're talking about, chime in, get on the line and join in. So they did that, and they found the sessions to be very informative and very, very good. And so going back and saying, okay, now at the next session, now we're not going to get everybody on at one time. That's just not going to happen. But what we can do is alternate. So at this session, here's what's being presented. You guys are here at the program. I'm here at the program. You guys join this one, or maybe we can all join together, or have one particular staff focusing on whatever, depending on, what's going on in the program, having some staff focus on what's going on with the residents, but having those where it can be available, join in on that meeting. And then rotate, because you're never going to find one particular time when everybody's going to be able to get on this line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that it's solution-based. So you're right. Continuum is a large organization. It is, and you're a service delivery organization. Nobody is sitting around filing their nails during the day. You're all working. We're all working, right? So creative ways, is there a way to record it just like we record these sessions? Is there a way for people to have input that are not able to attend? Everybody at some form should be involved. Gretchen?
I have one other thought on that. Because I spend a lot of time in the programs, I'm thinking I'm also wondering if we're not divided exactly correctly for something like this initially. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a couple of different groups. So that people feel completely comfortable to share, because some people might be less likely to share if leadership, somebody like myself, I'll just use me as an example, is on a call. They may feel they don't want to share as much. And so I think about it from a structural point of view, where you have the main committee, and then you have subgroups of that committee, and you have different people that attend the different subgroups of the committee, and then you have a spokesperson for that group that comes to the table to kind of share a summary that it might be something worth considering, because I do often wonder, do people always feel completely comfortable to share thoughts and feelings about an organization, and especially about systemic problems that exist when you have your leaders kind of all present?
Even on this call, we went back and forth as to
Yeah.
whether or not it was a good idea for leadership to be present.
Yeah.
Because if on a call like this, you're looking at your CEO or your direct supervisor, you may not feel comfortable really saying how you feel about the organization and where there are issues. You may not want to share. You may, whether or not it's perceived or real, you may feel that there will be ramifications if you say something negative about the structure of the organization, right?
And that is actually a fact of the matter. We do have a lot of staff who feel like if they speak up, there's going to be ramifications. And two, when they did speak up, there was no resolve, or they felt like maybe their voices wasn't being heard.
And that is by far more damaging to the organization than if you were able to have these open conversations. When people don't feel like there's any resolution to a problem, right? When people don't feel like their voice doesn't matter, they're not going to stay and grow within an organization. You're always going to have turnover if people, especially frontline staff, if they feel like their voice doesn't matter, they're going to go someplace where they feel like it does. That's just the reality of it. And you're down, what, 100 employees, right? So the retention is critical. So if you have staff, if you have direct reports that feel like their voice doesn't matter, it is a matter of time before another organization that pays more money and maybe has less stress, it's a matter of time before they leave. So
there's a hand up here, Virginia. Rama wants to say something.
Go ahead.
Hi. I've had the unique opportunity on working on both sides, and as you were saying that, I was having flashbacks about retention, and I was in 2 programs that had very high retention, and that's a problem, and it was forgive me, I'm going to say it was based on the relationships that the employees had with management, and also with and how safe they felt. And working with the clients was difficult. That was a given, and that was said. But it just made it so much harder when you don't have buy-in or support with your management staff. And a lot of my coworkers they're frustrated. They're like, I don't know why this is not being done. This is what's happening. Like, I work with this person every day. I know what's going on. Why aren't my opinions or my feedback or my observation not being taken into consideration? And it's usually, and that person is, and these people are very vocal about their what they're seeing, but they're getting pushback from other employees who kind of like the way things are because they're getting, it's a cush job. We don't have to try so hard. What do you mean I have to, go out on all these outings with, we just want to, he or she is fine sitting there. We're all, everything is good. Don't shake the boat. Everything is working fine for everybody. And that's kind of like an inertia set in the way a little bit in the two programs that I've been, and one very highly stressed, which that's a different story. But that's what I'm getting. That's the feel I'm getting. It's just the support, the managerial support, and when an employee is struggling with something and not getting that support to help with the situation or matter. And I've seen it on both sides.
Those are difficult. Those are, thank you for sharing that. Those are difficult conversations, because I'm sure none of us, nobody wants to get another employee in trouble, right? But if there is no way to let management know where there are issues, you're doing a disservice to the organization and to the clients that we serve, right? So, some people don't like change. They like, things to be exactly the way they were, and we're gonna, just ride this pony on down the street. But that in the long term, when really racial issues arise, you've not developed a culture within the organization to address issues, whether they're racial or not. You've used the word safe. So whether it's a safety issue with a client, whether it's a safety issue with an employee, whether it is a safety issue with a manager or leadership, everybody wants to work in an environment where they feel safe, where they feel heard. And if within the organization there is not a process to address these things, and you've got HR. I mean, everybody has HR, but D can't answer every question for everybody and make everybody feel safe in every space. So that means that there has to be a process where you identify areas areas that need attention, managers that need additional training, staff that need to have a process of who they can talk to, who they can vent to, who they can turn to when they don't have that manager or leader who is listening and hearing their voice. What do you do, right? If you don't feel safe and you report it to your supervisor and your supervisor doesn't do anything about it, what do you do then? Who do you talk to next, right? Do the senior leadership, are their doors open enough that you would feel comfortable going over your supervisor's head to talk to a Gretchen or a Dee or a John, right? How do you process that? And is the racial justice task force, is that a place where you do that? I mean, it's like two separate things that we're talking about here. And I think both of them are relevant, but one is the power dynamics within your organization. And the other thing is the racial equity lens within your organization. And sometimes those things bump heads. Other times, they're two separate things. But you still have to have a process. You still have to have a way, and you have to have a culture within your organization that people feel comfortable having these conversations. That's the question. It's like, do people feel comfortable having these conversations? And I think when you talk about the racial justice, I always get it mixed up, Deborah, don't kill me. The committee, what do you call it? The Racial Justice Task Force. Task Force, sorry. When you talk about that, could it be smaller ones that focus on specific issues, whether it is, clients cussing us out, clients using the N-word, that could be different from, there's another part of the task force is addressing policy change within the organization. I mean, everybody can't do everything, but you've got to have a process to get it done. You've got to have a process to have these conversations. And if the task force is one of them, is there a piece of that that talks about creating a pathway for leadership, creating an opportunity for mentorship and growth, creating an opportunity for allyship? There's got to be some place within there where allies can go and ask questions about things that they may have said or done, and check in and make sure that it's okay, right? Does all of this make sense? Or is this, do you think, more of the same stuff?
No, to me, it does make sense. But there's just so much, like you said, we've become such a big company that things that we were able to handle on a smaller scale they're becoming much bigger and bigger and a lot harder to juggle. So now I don't know, we need to come, maybe address it in a way where we, put our focus on our hardest hit program, and then slowly go and, go and fix those areas of great need. Then, and talk about the new path that we want to go on. And maybe by doing that, we can come up with a better, more equitable and structured and united continuum. Because you got to start small, to end up having a bigger effect. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud.
No, that's how you come to some, decision as to how to move forward. I would almost say it's a bottom up and a top down at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Bottom up and top down at the same time, so that, like you said, you can meet in the middle. Because at a leadership level, Patty and her team need to make sure that they have created a culture within this organization, leading by their example of an anti-racist organization. That does not mean that they will have all of the answers from the bottom up. Because the bottom up, that's the frontline staff people who, in most organizations, their voices aren't heard. So how does, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the leadership doesn't look like me, right? So as they look down on how are we in our leadership capacity, how are we doing the anti-racist work? While the people on the bottom up are saying, these are some of the challenges that we are facing. This is some of the hard stuff that we have to deal with. And then when you meet in the middle, you can actually put some good stuff in good policy, good procedure, good support in place, because you actually have that lived experience, right? But you also have the oversight and the leadership's commitment to diversity within the organization. Because all this is great, but if all of the leadership for the rest of time is still white, we haven't done the work. Now, there is diversity. I mean, the leadership team is not that big. It's what, 7? How many VPs? 5, 7, 8? So
8.
And we have, of the 8, we have 2 of color, right? D said 1.
Well,
Yes,
Jim,
but Jim is South Asian Pacific descent, so he regards himself as other than white.
Okay.
And then you have Monica, who's Latino.
Okay. All right. So that's representative of where you start. So when you think about your next rung of leadership, what does that next rung of leadership look like, right? So if you're finding that that next rung of leadership does not reflect the clients that you serve, then you know you need to groom your next rung of leadership to be more diverse. So this is my passion across the board. We talk about it at every board meeting. The board is working on diversity because we also on the board need to reflect the organization which reflects the clients we serve. It's critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's critical. So when I think about leadership, I think about if they really are committed to diversity within the organization, they are also going to be looking for qualified, diverse employees to groom for the next rung of leadership, right? It is preparing the organization for the next 50 years, for the next 20 years, for the next 5 years. Who are those people within our organization who, not just promote, not just because of the color of their skin, right? But for the potential and for their commitment and for their qualifications. That's what we're looking at. Comments.
Can I just say that the next rung of management and leadership is much more diverse than the upper levels of management are. And part of that, I think, is all of that is wonderful. But, there's those of us that have been here for, 39 years, 25 years. Part of the culture of Continuum is that people like to work here, I think, for the most part. So people stay a long time, and that makes turning over and accomplishing sometimes the racial diversity a little bit more difficult. On the flip side of that, 62%, I believe, of our employees are African American.
So all of that is true, and also it can be true that people don't leave when they love their job, but eventually people leave. And the goal then is to make sure we're constantly developing a pipeline of qualified individuals, people of color, women, to be the next leader. Gretchen's not going to stay here forever. Who wants Gretchen's job? Anybody?
I ask that all the time. And any of my people on this call tell me I don't ask that question.
So, and not that Gretchen is going anywhere, but Gretchen's commitment to diversity and to making sure that her team, that she is cultivating her team to grow is what's important. We don't want Gretchen to leave, right? But that day will come and Gretchen will rest easy knowing that she has prepared her team for whomever may be the next Gretchen. Same as Patty. Patty's not gonna, as much as she cries, she's eventually one day she really is going to retire. Right? So who's the next Patty? Who is he or she? Who's the next Jim? Who's the next Dave? Right? It's just ensuring that we are committed to being the type of power structure that we are developing talent within, and that we are committed to the diversity of our organization, right? Only gatekeepers don't share. People who don't want to see you progress and grow, we call them gatekeepers. And they keep you, no matter what your talent is, they keep you from investing in a long-term commitment to Continuum. Because what happens? You get tired of waiting. You get tired of not feeling like like your supervisor is invested in you, and you leave. And that's what we don't want to happen. We want people to feel heard. We want people to feel safe, and we want people to feel that there's an opportunity here. And that has more to do with equity than anything else. Anything else? Deborah, was there anything else that I was supposed to talk about that I didn't?
Can I just add, just in thinking about the structure. So I've worked at Continuum for several years, and I came on board part-time. I was perfectly happy being part-time. I came from a previous career of, directors and managers and all that stuff. So I've been from the very bottom all the way to the top. However, I think along that ride, no matter what position you're in, you have to be open to speak, whether you think you may be heard or not. But you also have to have your team, no matter what the level is, cheering you on and seeing the areas that you've grown in, seeing the potential that you have and pushing you to go to the next level. A lot of staff sometimes are stagnant because they're afraid to make the next move. But if I'm going to encourage you, because like you said, I want to see you do my job. I want to know at the end of the day when I go home that whatever is going on at the programs, at the management level, whatever the level, I want to know that things are going to be handled smoothly. The transition is going to be good. And I don't have to worry about if I'm going to get a call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because I know I've done my job to groom you and to put you in a position where you can take on those additional tasks. I'm going to give you those additional tasks to see where you can grow, to see what you can handle and what you can't handle. And then we're going to work on those things. But if you don't have that going through across the board, that makes a significant difference in the rate in which your company will grow.
And it will make a difference in whether or not you're able to retain people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is, when you have power structures that or systems of privilege, or even institutional power, because that's really where we started, institutional power, right? When you have institutional power and there's an undercurrent of racism, the organization won't grow, because people aren't going to stay in an environment where racism is allowed to grow. And whether it's you want to do the hard work of transforming how your clients treat the employees. That starts with how the employees treat the employees, right? How we treat each other, right? How we show up, how we feel supported, how we feel, safe, back to the safe. That happens in institutions where the power structure is equitable. Action steps. So the number one thing is I really would encourage you all to, Deborah's going to kill me when I say this, but you guys have a really long list of stuff to read. And you might want to think about starting with something like a continuum book club. We have these we call them cultural academies, and we do it in partnership with the New Haven Police Department and another program. And we take a book that talks about that is about the Black experience, and we don't read it together. We each, we break it up into sections, and we read, and then we just come back and we have a discussion about it. You've got to find ways to connect the frontline staff with the middle management, senior leadership. You've got to find a way to create so you can start having some honest dialogue about where there might be undercurrents, and I'm not saying there are, but where you all might feel undercurrents of racism. So a cultural academy, a book club might be an opportunity to just explore the Black experience together. So there's a ton of great books you can, read or movies that you can watch and come back and have a conversation about. But you've got to find a way to keep having conversations about race so that it doesn't, kind of fade away and quietly step off into the night, which often happens. And then racial issues are inflamed when you have issues in the country. You have a George Floyd, when things like that happen, race rises to the top, and then people kind of, forget about it. And, we're not talking about it. We're not watching a trial. We're not seeing something that happened in another state on the news or looking at a march here. We tend to not really continue to do the work. And it's work. You got to continue to do the work to be an anti-racist organization, which is what I know you all want. You all want to be in an environment where, I'm promoted because I am the most qualified and the most skilled, and I've got a mentor who is grooming me for the next role, right? We all want to work in that environment. But I think it's too easy to slip back into our little silos of people of color discussing amongst yourself issues that happen in the organization, and it never making its way up the chain so that leadership knows. You make the assumption that leadership knows about something racist that happened within the organization. So I would encourage you to find ways to stay connected as a group, find ways to build your justice task force, because I think that's where a lot of the good work will happen. But you've got to find a way to include people who are frontline, who are, in direct care and may not have the ability to log on to a Zoom and be a part of solution within the organization. Because this is hard work. I work for a civil rights organization, and it's hard work. We're about to really hit some trying times between reproductive rights, the threat to interracial marriage is on the table, right? Whoever thought we'd be back here? Whoever thought we'd be back, fighting for women's rights? But with that, the way that they do it is they attack civil rights, because civil rights is something that everybody's impacted by. You don't, just because you're brown doesn't mean that, just because you are not brown doesn't mean that you won't be impacted by that. Because when they start coming for same-sex relationships, interracial marriage, right to choose it for your body, then everybody's impacted by it. So the work has to continue. Deborah, anything before we call it a day? I want to be an hour and a half. Boy, that girl could talk. Anything we want to share before we call it a day?
No, I think this was great, and I was pleased to hear from people how they were feeling. Definitely something for all of us to be mindful of, the power structures. And as far as next steps and possibly a book club, and we are working, the task force is supposed to be working on the client aspect of policies. And it is right now our task force has over 30 people in it. So, and they are from all parts of the organization. So, I think it's definitely a good idea to see what timing works and how we could do better. That's really good point. So we'll have to reach out and figure that out. But back to book club and continue conversations. Love to hear everybody's ideas. We really need to figure that out. Virginia, if you have some ideas on books that have been really impactful in what you've been doing, the work you've been doing, and perhaps you can help us, run something like that, whether it's books, movies, or a combination. That would be good. But as I mentioned, I had said to you in the chat, I'm happy to send out a Survey Monkey if you want to, help with that, or if any of you out on the Zoom call or otherwise want to help. I think that would be wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Gretchen says that she's working with Torre on a presentation for a conference on working on training for clients on racial regards in residential settings. And we'd love to have people join that effort.
Any questions, you guys can email me on it and I can explain more, but it should be a really cool presentation that we're going to do at a statewide level. So
awesome. Well,
and
definitely.
I'd rather take a back seat. So I'm happy to help guide it and support it and provide, but I'd rather be on the back seat of this.
So what I just would, in wrapping up, I just want to say to everybody on this call, if you don't have a mentor, you should have a mentor. And you should ask for mentorship. You shouldn't assume that somebody's going to take you under their wing. I have different mentors for different things in my life. And I have to tell you that those sometimes it is a check-in via Zoom or in person over coffee. Sometimes it's a call, sometimes it's an email, depending on where you are in your life and in your professional career. Everybody should have somebody that can give them great direction and that can answer questions. I mean, if there are issues around race and you don't have a mentor, you should, because that's somebody who you can bounce these things off of, right? Yeah, I think mentorship is important, especially for women. All right.
So again, Virginia, thank you so much. You've been such a gem, and we're going to continue in some way. So thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. Everybody, share my contact information if anybody wants to reach out and wants to chat or anything. Just, I'm the work continues. It doesn't end. So
spell at VT spell.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Virginia.
See you soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everything.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, I'm going to hop off and finish my book.
Okay, thank you so much. Take
You're
care.
welcome. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. We'll talk soon. Okay.
All right, sweetie. Bye-bye.
Bye.